Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaste and welcome to this course on wildlife ecology. I am Dr. Ankur Avadia. I am an officer in the Indian Forest Service of the Madhya Pradesh cadre. So, this course is going to have 12 modules with 3 lectures in each module, and we begin with the first module, that is the introduction to the course. In this module we will be having 3 lectures. First is introduction to the course, second is a historical overview of ecology, and third is ecology and evolution. So, let us begin this course with a story. Now, this story concerns a girl who lives in a village. So, let us call this girl as Miss X, and she is living in a village. This village is a very beautiful village. It is surrounded by some beautiful hills. It has a river that passes through it. It has some trees around, some grasslands, some fields, and this girl is fond of looking at nature, and she is very fond of looking at different kinds of birds that are found in this village. So, there are some flying birds, there are some water birds, there are some ground dwelling birds, there are some parakeets that live on the trees, and so on. But then this village also has a lot of infestation of mosquitoes, and mosquitoes result in malaria, which is a major issue in this village. So, one day the government decides that let us take a plane full of insecticides to this village and spray this village with the insecticides to kill off the mosquitoes. A very fine idea, a number of people would say. So, and mind you, the chemical that is being sprayed here is an insecticide, it only kills insects, or so the company claims. So, the village is sprayed with insects, and lo and behold, the girl finds that after a short while all her beautiful birds that were there in the village die off. Now, this story might appear hypothetical, but we are observing such instances in a number of places around the world. We have seen situations in which the spray of DDT has resulted in the death of birds. Now, if you spray DDT in a very low concentration, because to kill a mosquito you do not require a very huge amount of DDT. So, you spray this insecticide in a very low concentration, and still a number of birds die, and when their bodies are autopsied, it is found that they have a very huge concentration of DDT that is found inside their bodies. Now, let us look at another story. Now, this is a paper which says high levels of PCBs in breast milk of Inuit women from Arctic Quebec. Now, PCBs are polychlorinated biphenyls. Now, these are chemicals that are added to a number of plastics, and when Inuit women refers to women who have an Eskimo lifestyle. So, Quebec is a place in Canada. So, there are some Eskimo women that are living in the Arctic region of Canada, and when their breast milk was analyzed, it was found that it had a very high concentration of polychlorinated biphenyl. Now, the question arises that Arctic is a very serene place. It is, we do not go there and dump these chemicals in the Arctic, and still in the human population there we observe that there is a very huge concentration of a number of chemicals, a number of which are toxic to the newborn babies. So, some people have even argued that the most toxic food that a human being can eat is the breast milk of an Eskimo woman that is living in the Arctic regions. Now, how do these chemicals reach there, and is it important for us? Well, it is important because if you have chemicals in the breast milk, invariably they are going to reach another human body, and in this case the body of a human baby, and in certain instances this may even result in very tragic consequences. For instance, this was a case in which an infant was killed because it was breastfed by its mother, and the mother of the baby was on some drugs, she was taking drugs, and the baby died because the baby was getting a very high concentration of the drugs. Now, questions such as these are arising everywhere, they are arising anywhere and everywhere on this planet, and ecology deals with a number of these questions. So, if you look at the word roots, ecology comes from the Greek words oikos and logos. Oikos means a household where people live. So, when we say ecology, oikos is home and logos is study. Now, we can see eco as a word root also in things such as economics, in which eco or oikos is home and nomi is to count. Now, ecology is the study of home. It could be my home, it could be your home, it could be somebody else's home, or it could be the home of other animals. It could be the home of tiger, it could be the home of elephant, it could be a marine home, and so on. Now, because of these word roots, we can have a number of different kinds of ecologies. So, for instance, when we are looking at the population of humans, we can have a subject of human ecology. If we are looking at different populations, we can have population ecology. If we are looking at marine environment, we can have marine ecology, because the marine environment is also a home to a number of animals. We can have forest ecology, or we can even have things like lacustrine ecology, which is a lake ecology. So, in all of these, what we are doing is we are studying the home of some organisms or some groups of organisms. So, which is why it is called ecology. So, ecology is the study of life at home, at the home of you, me, or some other organism. So, if we went to define ecology, ecology can be defined as the scientific study of interactions among organisms and their environment. So, essentially, if we have a forest, and then we have some animals here in the forest. So, let us say that we have an elephant in the forest. Now, this elephant would be deriving its nutrients from these trees, or maybe from the grasses below. So, they also act as food. Now, and when this animal is living in the forest, there might also be some other animal in this forest. So, let us have, so here we have say another animal. Let us say that this animal is a sambar, and this sambar also eats this grass. So, we could have competition between both of these animals. So, this animal, our elephant, is interacting with the trees, it is interacting with the sambar, it is interacting with a number of other organisms, and it is also interacting, and it is also dependent on the environment that is here. So, for instance, it would depend on the amount of sunlight that is there. If it is very hot or if it is very cold, then probably this animal might not be able to live in that area. Probably this animal might have to migrate from this area. Or for instance, if we have a river that is passing through this area, and if this river dries out, so this animal is now not getting enough water, so it might have to move out. So, ecology is the study of all of these. So, ecology is the scientific study of interactions among organisms and their environment. So, in this system, we have the organisms, we have the environment, and we are studying all of these interactions. Another definition could be that the ecology is the scientific study of interactions that determine the distribution and abundance of organisms. So, what we are looking here is the distribution of animals or organisms and the abundance of organisms. Now, to take another example, suppose we have this mountain, and in this mountain at this level we have an average temperature of say around 20 degrees Celsius, and as we move up the temperature reduces. So, in this region we have around 15, 10, 5, 0, and this area has an annual average temperature of minus 5 degrees Celsius. Now, the organisms that are found in this zone, let us call it zone 1, will be very different from the organisms that are found in zone 2, and extremely different from the organisms that are found in, let us say this is 3, 4, 5, 6. So, in zone 6. Now, if you look at the definition again, ecology is the scientific study of the interactions that determine the distribution and abundance of organisms. Now, what we will be asking here in the case of ecology is what organisms are found in this zone, what organisms are found in this zone, and so on, and if they are different, why are they different? Is it because of the temperature? Is it because of wind? Is it because of less amount of sunshine that this region gets, or is it because of less amount of moisture or differences in moisture that are there in different areas? So, what are these factors that are determining the distribution of these organisms? And secondly, what are the factors that are determining the abundance of these organisms? Now, when we say abundance, what we are referring to is that if we take any of these parameters, so let us say temperature, and we look at the number of organisms per square kilometer, number of organisms of species X per square kilometer. Now, what we will observe is that there would be a set of temperature in which these organisms find it very easy or very congenial to survive. So, for instance, in the case of us human beings, if our surrounding temperature is say around 25 degrees Celsius, we will feel extremely comfortable. So, this is the most comfortable zone. But then if we increase this temperature to, so this was say 25 degrees Celsius, now let us increase it to say 40 degrees Celsius. Now, at 40 degrees Celsius, a number of us might not be able to feel very comfortable. So, there would be some people who would find it comfortable, but there would be a very huge chunk of people who would find it relatively uncomfortable. So, little less number of organisms would be found in this region. Or let us increase the average temperature to say 60 degrees Celsius, and probably 1 or even 0 of us human beings would be found in that region, in that temperature range. Now, similarly, if we reduce the temperature to say 10 degrees Celsius, we would find that less number of people are able to find this temperature to be congenial. If we reduce it to even less, to say 0 degrees Celsius, probably very few of us would be able to live there. So, we can now draw a curve that is something like this. Now, this curve is telling us the abundance of human beings that would be found at different temperatures. So, there is this zone, we are arbitrarily dividing this curve into 3 regions. So, in this zone we will have less number of animals, in this zone we will be having more number of animals, in this zone we will be having less number of animals, and in these zones we will probably be having 0 number of animals. Now, similarly for every organism, so for elephant there would be a certain range of temperature in which it will find congenial to survive. For the case of tigers, there would be a very different range of temperatures. For polar bears, it will be a very different zone. So, in the case of polar bears, we could even have a situation in which we have a maximum somewhere here. So, polar bears would probably prefer to live somewhere say around 1 or 2 degrees average temperature, or maybe even lesser. Now, when we look at ecology, what we are asking is the interactions that are determining the distribution and abundance of organisms. So, distribution, what are the areas in which these organisms are able to live, and abundance, what is their number. Now, these are physical factors, but we could also have a number of biological factors. So, for instance, in a forest in which you have ample number of prey animals. So, if you have a forest in which you have a substantial population of cheetal or sambar, you would find tigers that are living in that area. But if you have another forest in which we have very less number of cheetals and sambars, then probably tigers will not survive in that area because they are not getting enough food. So, you can even have a number of biological factors. Or for instance, if you have a forest in which you have a very huge density of tigers, then probably leopards will not be able to live in that area because they cannot compete with tigers. So, leopards would be found in an area where you do not have a very substantial number of tigers. So, you can have physical factors that determine distribution and abundance, or you can have biological factors that determine the distribution and abundance. Now, let us recount some of the physical factors. Now, physical could be things like temperature, or say rainfall, or humidity, or wind speed, or the depth of soil that is found in that area, or the amount of sunshine that the area gets, or in the case of marine environments we could even have things like the amount of salinity that is there in a particular segment of water, or things such as the amount of sediment load that is there in the water, or in the case of rivers we could even have things such as the speed of water. So, for instance, in the case of a river, the central region that has greater speeds would be used by certain organisms, and the surrounding regions that have lesser speeds would be utilized by some other organisms. So, these are all different physical factors that would determine the distribution and abundance of different organisms, and ecology would ask the question, what are these interactions that are driving the abundance and distribution of these animals. Now, let us look at some biological factors or the biotic factors. Now, biotic factors could include things such as food. So, this food could include things like the amount of grass or vegetation that you have, or the amount of prey that you have in this area. It would also be another biotic factor that would determine distribution and abundance would be the presence or absence of predators in the area. So, if an area is having a very huge population of tigers, then probably cheetal and sambar would not prefer to live in that area because they will get eaten if they live there. Or you can have things such as parasites, or you can have things like diseases. So, a number of these factors play a role in determining the abundance and distribution of the animals, and ecology is the scientific study of all these different factors and their interactions that are determining the distribution and abundance of organisms. So, what do we actually study in ecology? So, this was the theoretical basis, but what do we actually look at in ecology? Well, we look at habitats. Habitat is the home of an animal, the natural home or the abode of the animal. So, for instance, this is the Indian wild ass, and this lives in these sorts of habitats. So, we have this Indian wild ass sanctuary in Gujarat, and as you can see, this is a very plain topography area. It hardly has any vegetation in most of the areas. There are some hills that have slight amount of vegetation. Then this is a very dry area. It has a lot of saline soil. So, ecology would go out and study what are the kinds of habitats that are there in different areas, and how are these different habitats determining whether this organism is able to survive in that area or not. So, for instance, we find Indian wild ass only there. We do not find it in, say, West Bengal, because the habitats that are provided or that are available in West Bengal are very different from the habitats that are available in Gujarat. And similarly, we have the Royal Bengal tiger that is found in West Bengal, but it is not found in Gujarat. So, ecology would go out and ask the question, what are the different kinds of habitats that the organisms get in different areas. Then it would go out and ask what is the amount of biodiversity that we have. So, for instance, in the previous image we saw that we have this Indian wild ass, and there are hardly any other animals that are seen here, and also the kinds of grasses that we have or the kinds of vegetation that we have here is very different from say something that we will find in Bharatpur. Now, Bharatpur is a bird sanctuary, and in this area we will find a number of birds, we will find and this area is regularly inundated with water. So, in this area we will be having a number of water birds, we will be having ground dwelling birds, we will be having a number of birds that live on these trees. Even the vegetation in this area will be very different, because this area has ample amount of water. So, the kinds of trees that will live here will be very different from what we are finding there in Gujarat. So, the next question that ecology would try to study is the level of biodiversity that we have. What are the different kinds of species that are found in each area? What is their abundance and distribution? So, for instance, if we look at this area, do we have say 1000 birds of this species and say only 10 birds of some other species, or do we have equal number of birds of all of these different species? So, that is also another topic that is studied in ecology. Next, we look at population interactions. Now, population is a group of animals that are living together and they belong to the same species. So, for instance, in this image we can see a troop of macaques. So, we have these macaques, and if you look at these two animals, this animal is grooming this second animal. So, what are the kinds of population interactions? How do they behave together? Why do they behave in this manner? So, for instance, what is the profit or loss, or the gain or loss that is being provided to this animal by grooming this animal? Because in the first instance it might seem that this is an act of altruism. This animal is only grooming this animal and not getting anything in return. Now, such a system might not work in practice. So, in any case, this animal should give something back to this animal that was grooming it. So, how do these interactions work in these populations? How is this animal able to give back to the first animal? Are the kinds of things that we will study in ecology. Next, we will look at community interactions. Now, community is a group of organisms that belong to different species and they are living together. So, for instance, in this image, this is from Kaziranga, we can see we have a buffalo, we have some scavengers in the form of vultures, and then we have a number of different trees here, different species. Now, community interactions means what are the kinds of interactions that are being held between say this buffalo and the scavengers, or between the buffalo and the trees, and so on. So, for instance, in a number of trees we have a phenomena that is known as zoophily. Now, zoophily, zoo is animal and phily is love. Now, zoophily is a situation in which you say have a tree and this tree bears fruits, and then these fruits are eaten up by a bird, and when this bird eats up this fruit, it gets nutrients, but at the same time the seeds also get inside the bird. So, now the seeds of the tree are inside this bird, and then this bird moves to say some other location. So, let us say there is an electricity line and this bird then goes there, and then this bird defecates these seeds out here, and when it defecates you have all these seeds that have fallen onto the ground, and then after a while, after the next rains, we will have some small plants of this tree that grow up in this area. So, in this case this tree is using the bird as a vehicle to transport its seeds. So, zoo is animal, so it is using this animal which is the bird to transport its seeds. So, again in this case we can see that there is a one to one interaction or a give and take relationship between both of these organisms. The tree is giving food to the bird and the bird is giving a transport mechanism to the tree. So, here we have organisms that belong to two different species and they are interacting in a way that is mutually beneficial to both of these. Now, similarly, in this situation if we have the buffalo, is it helping the trees or is it harming the trees or some other vegetation? Similarly, if you look at these vultures, are they helping the system or are they harming the system, and how are they doing that? So these are the kinds of interactions that we observe in a community, and this is also a topic of study in ecology. Now, ecology also looks at the impacts or the effects of different changes that are happening on our earth. So, for instance, this is an image again from Gujarat, and here we can observe a number of goats, and as you can observe, here we have these sand dunes, and we also have a very scanty vegetation. Now, if you have vegetation somewhere, so the roots of the plants are able to bind the soil or are able to bind the sand in this region. Now, if you have goats and if you have a large number of goats that are going there and eating away these plants, what will happen in a short while is that after these plants get removed, this sand will be able to move freely because it is now unbound, and so you will have a situation in which the amount of erosion would increase in the system. Or for instance, earlier this area was having some vegetation, and so we had a situation in which this area is a semi-arid area, but once you have removed all of these plants and you do not have any further seeds that remain in this area will become completely barren, it will become a complete desert. So things such as these, things such as desertification that are being brought about by some human activities are also topics that we study in ecology. So effects of changes. So these are some topics that we study in ecology, but how do we study these? So there are three approaches to ecology. The first is called the theoretical approach. Now in the theoretical approach, we use equations and models in an ab initio manner to understand what is going on in the system. So for instance, to give an example, you have say a predator and you have a prey population. Now if the number of prey increases, then we will observe that the number of predators would also increase because they are getting more amount of food, and because they are getting more amount of food, they will be able to devote more resources to reproduction. So an increase in the prey population would increase the predator population. But then if you have more number of predators because of this increase, that would provide a negative feedback. So a negative feedback to the prey population, because you have more number of predators, so these predators would be preying upon the prey population and would reduce their numbers. So this would reduce it down. Now if this number reduces, if the number of prey animals reduces, that would again go back and reduce the population of the predators, and when that number reduces, that would again give a feedback that would increase the prey population. So to put it in other words, if you have more prey, that would give you more predators. Now if you have more predators, that would result in which a number of prey animals are eaten up, which would result in less prey. Now if you have less prey, so you will have less amount of food that is available to the predators, so that would result in less number of predators, because less number of prey population is able to support a lesser number of predator population. Now if you have less number of predators, the prey would be able to increase, so then we would be having more number of preys. Now this is something that we can understand intuitively. Now if we go to the theoretical approach, so theoretical approach would begin with such a framework and would then go on and define different equations and different models through which we can understand this system. So for instance, if you have prey population that is represented by small p and predator population that is represented by capital P, so our theoretical approach would ask that if you have this prey population, it would be a function of the predator population and the existing prey population, and what would be the equation through which we can model this system. And we will have an example. So, this system is governed by what we call as the Lotka-Volterra equations, and we will have a greater look at this system in more detail in one of the later lectures. Now, the second approach to ecology is a laboratory approach. So, laboratory approach uses the scientific method of formulating hypotheses and testing them through experiments. So, to give an example, suppose we have this area, and so suppose this is a pond, and in this pond we are having a very less amount of algae. Now, the question that we could ask here is, what are the factors that are limiting the algae population in this pond? So, again we are looking at the abundance and distribution of an organism. In this case, this organism is algae, and now we are asking the question, what are the limiting factors in this pond because of which the population is less? So, what we can do in this case is that we can divide this pond into different regions. So, we can set up curtains, and once we have set up these curtains, we have these different regions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Now, once we have set up these curtains, water cannot move from one of these areas to the to another area. So, all of these zones have now become different from each other. Now, what we can do is that, say we have a hypothesis that we have a less population of algae here because there is less amount of nitrogen that is available to the plants. So, in that case, what we will do is that in this area we will add nitrogen. Maybe there is another hypothesis that this could be because of less amount of phosphorus that we have in this area. So, in another area we will add phosphorus, in another area we will add potassium, and so on. So, we can formulate n number of hypotheses, and then we can perform this experiment. We can alter all of these different factors. Maybe you could even have a factor of temperature. So, probably temperature is very less, and so your plants are not able to grow here. So, probably in this area we will put up a heater and will heat up this water, or probably temperature is too high. So, in another area we could reduce the temperature, or in the case of these nutrients we could have a sector in which we reduce nitrogen, we reduce phosphorus, we reduce potassium. In some other areas we add iron, in some other areas we reduce iron. So, we can perform n number of experiments, and in all of these experiments we will keep certain areas as controls. So, control is a sector in which we are not doing anything. So, this is how our system was without doing any of the interventions. So, in this approach what we will do is we will formulate hypothesis that we can have these n number of reasons because of which we are having less number of or less population of algae in these waters. We could have a deficiency of certain nutrients, we could have an excess of some nutrients that are becoming toxic to these plants, or maybe we could have less temperature, higher temperature, less amount of sunshine, more amount of sunshine. We can formulate n number of hypotheses, and then we can perform experiments to check all of these. So, we can alter all of these different variables, and then we can check them with the controls. So, probably it turns out that in this experiment, say there was an area in which magnesium was added, magnesium was reduced, or say chloride was added or chloride was reduced, and so on. So, probably it turns up that in all of these different areas nothing changes, but in the area with magnesium we can more number of plants that have come up. So, once this happens, we will be able to tell that we have a less population of algae in this pond because of a deficiency of magnesium. So, this would be a laboratory approach. So, we are using the scientific method of formulating hypothesis. So, the first step is to formulate hypothesis. What are the things that could be playing a role in having a reduced population, and then we can test them out using experiments. So, we looked at the theoretical approach and the laboratory approach. The third approach is the field approach. So, field approach is through observations in the field. Now, a very good example of the field approach is what we refer to as the langur cheetal association. Now, this association between these two species was figured out in Kanha. So, what people observed was that if you have a big tree and in this tree you have some langur population, that is a troop of langurs that are there on these trees, you will also find a number of cheetals that would come below this tree. So, what are the factors that are resulting in this particular distribution of animals, that wherever you get langurs on trees you find cheetals coming there. So, what people did was they just sat and they observed what are these langurs doing to the cheetals. So, they observed that if you are a langur and you are on top of a tree, you have a very good vantage location to observe the surroundings. So, if you have a tiger that comes up here and if you have these tall grasslands, so you have these grasses that are there, so a cheetal will not be able to observe the tiger, but a langur will be able to observe the tiger. And whenever this animal observes the tiger, it starts giving out calls, alarm calls, so that other langurs are also alarmed that there is a predator nearby. Now, when this happens, and you have a cheetal that is also nearby, so cheetal also hears the alarm. So, even though your cheetal was not able to see a tiger because it was there on the ground, it was not perching high up on the tree, if it is close to the langurs, it can make use of that information. So, that is one benefit that is provided by the langurs to the cheetals. Secondly, whenever the langurs are eating the leaves of the tree, they tend to be a bit destructive feeders. So, what they will do is they will pluck up a leaf, they will eat up its petiole and they will throw the rest of the leaves down. Now, especially in seasons where you have scanty vegetation or you have less number of green grass that is available. So, say in the summer season, you have this area that has all the dry grasses. Now, dry grasses are mostly unpalatable because they have a very high amount of silica content. If cheetal is going to eat up a dry grass, it is going to injure its mouth. So, it requires green vegetation. Now, when it comes to the bottom of this tree, a langur that will be plucking a leaf, eating its petiole and throwing the rest of the part down. So, cheetal will automatically get access to this food resource. So, this cheetal it is unable to climb up a tree and it is unable to get those leaves by itself, but by coming in close contact with the langurs, by just coming where the langurs are eating, and it can eat now all the leaves that are falling from the trees. So, this is a kind of observation that can only be made in the field. Now, similarly, why does langur tolerate cheetals when it is there? Because a langur is getting a viewpoint from here, it is not getting a viewpoint from here. Cheetals also have a very good sense of smell. So, probably if you have a tiger here and a langur was not able to see this tiger and the wind was blowing in this direction, so cheetal was able to get a sense. So, when cheetal gets a sense of this predator nearby, it will also give out an alarm call, it would run away and that would alert the langurs. So, essentially this kind of an association in which you have two different organisms that are interacting with each other, or a community interaction, can also be studied using the field approach. So, in the field approach we use observations in the field. So, these are three approaches to ecology, and in the rest of the course we will make use of all of these three different approaches to understand why an organism is somewhere, why an organism is not found somewhere else, and what we can do to help these organisms or to conserve these organisms. So, these are the three approaches to ecology: the theoretical approach, the laboratory approach and the field approach. So, in this course we will be having, so let us now have a look at the outline of the course. So, we will be having 12 modules in this course. The first module is introduction. introduction to the course, a historical overview of ecology, which will tell us who did what to make the field of ecology. What are the contributions of different people, different scientists who made ecology the field that exists today. Next, we will have a look at ecology and evolution. Does ecology drive evolution, and if yes, how does it do that? The second module will be about ecological structure. So, in structure we will have a look at the levels of organization. So, when we say a population of animals or a community of different organisms, what is an ecosystem and things like that. So, we will look at different levels of organization and how this organization helps the system to survive. Next, we will have a look at species abundance and distribution or biodiversity, and we will look at it in greater detail in the third lecture. The third module is ecological interactions. So, we will have a look at positive interactions and negative interactions and the study of behaviors and behavioral ecology. The fourth module is ecological energetics. So, in this module we will have a look at food chains, food webs and trophic levels, and we will also understand how and why are the birds dying because of the insecticides. We will have a look at primary production. So, primary production is how plants make food out of sunlight, and we will also have nutrient cycles, say carbon cycle, nitrogen cycle and so on. The fifth module is population ecology. Now, population is a group of animals that belong to the same species. So, say a group of cheetal or a group of sambar, that is a population. Now, if we want to study a population, we will have to define a number of population parameters. So, what is the number of organisms that are there, what is their sex ratio, how many offsprings are born to each mother and so on. We will also have a look at different demographic techniques to get an idea of these population parameters. Next, we will have a look at population growth and regulation. So, for instance, say we wanted to conserve tigers, how does this tiger population grow? Why is it not that we put tigers into a forest and this population shoots up? What are the factors that regulate its growth, and what are the factors that may even lead to its decline are things that we will understand in this lecture. Next, population studies and their application. So, this is more of an applied topic. The sixth module is about community ecology, community nature and parameters, changes and ecological succession. So, succession is a process in which the ecology changes or the ecosystem changes from one state to another state. So, for instance, if you have say a piece of barren rock, so on this rock after a while we might observe that some algae grow up, and when you have some algae on these rocks, so after a while they would start degrading this rock, converting it into soil. Once you have the soil there, then you might have some other organisms that come in, say you have grasses that come into this rocky region. Once you have these grasses, they will degrade the rocks even further and make way to say small plants followed by some trees. So, this is the process of ecological succession. So, in the process of ecological succession, every species makes way for the next species till you reach a climax. So, we will have a look at ecological succession and also community organization. Now, the seventh module is about distribution and abundance. So, we have biogeography, that is the analysis of geographic distributions. Next, we have why are things where they are, what are the factors that regulate this distribution and abundance, and we will have a look at some push and pull factors in greater detail. The eighth module is management of threatened species. So, what are the different kinds of threats that we have to different species? So, there are a number of species that we are trying to conserve. We have tigers, we have elephants and so on. So, what are the threats that are being faced by these species, and what can we do to reduce the impacts of these threats? So, we divide it into in situ conservation and ex situ conservation. The ninth module is topics in human ecology. So, we will have an introductory session followed by human population growth and food requirements and sustainable development. The 10th module is ecology of change. So, we will have impacts of climate change, impacts of plastics especially on biodiversity, and the impacts of oil spills. The 11th module is applied ecology. So, we have the optimum yield problem, biological control, and ecotoxicology and pollution management and restoration ecology. And then we will devote a week to revision of all the topics that we have covered so far. Now, in this course we will have a continuous assessment. So, the assessment will be in the form of assignments and in the form of a final exam. Assignments will comprise multiple choice questions which will be based on the week's topics, and in the final exam we will be having 3 kinds of questions. So, we will be having final exam in 2 different slots, a morning slot and an evening slot, and we will be having 3 different kinds of questions. We will have recall questions. So, recall questions are those questions in which you have to give an answer based on recall from the lectures. Then we will have some questions that will come from the assignments, may be slightly modified, but more or less based on the assignments. And third will be open type questions that will test your wider understanding of the whole topic. And the final exam will also comprise of multiple choice questions. Now, the final exam will be computer based and will not require you to write any lengthy answers. So, in this lecture we had a look at what ecology is, what are the different kinds of topics that we study in ecology, what is habitat, what are the kinds of interactions that we have, what is a population, what is a community, and so on. And we also had a look at 3 different approaches to ecology. We have theoretical approach, we have a laboratory based approach, and we have the field approach, and we will make use of all of these approaches as we move forward in this lecture. So, thank you for your attention. Jai Hind.